In this video, I'm counting down my top 10 football games for the Sega Saturn. Now, I didn't own the system in the 90s, so much like my Dreamcast video, I was coming at most of these fresh, and it was an experience to say the least. Halfway through making this, I started thinking maybe I'd bitten off more than I could chew. There are so many more football games on the Saturn than I first thought, and boy oh boy did things start getting complicated. I found myself drowning in a sea of overlapping versions and licenses. Sega had multiple teams making games using the same names. For example, Victory Goal, International Victory Goal and JLeague Victory Goal 97 were all made by different Sega teams, and many of their games were released in different territories under different names just to add to the confusion. Okay, so let's get into it. Just like my Dreamcast video, I only ranked the playable football games, and for each game I focused on the key 3 areas I think make a football game: the features and modes, sound and visuals, and the gameplay. Kicking us off at number 10 is Worldwide Soccer, Sega International Victory Goal Edition, catchy title. Developed by Sega's Team Aquila and released in North America in May 1995, this was essentially the Western update to the Japanese launch title Victory Goal, swapping out the JLeague for international teams. In terms of features and modes, it's largely a copy and paste job from the original Victory Goal. You only have a choice of 10 international teams, and the modes mimic its predecessor closely, with exhibitions, an international cup and a couple of league modes. There are no real players, not even knock-off sound-alikes like ISS Pro used to do. They are just made up for the game, so don't expect to see any familiar faces on the team sheet. Looking at the sound and visuals, if you have played Victory Goal, you're going to get a massive sense of deja vu here. To my eyes, the visuals look exactly the same. Graphically, the game is fine for its time, with an almost 3D sensible soccer vibe. The stadiums look okay, and there's a jumbotron screen showing animations during goals. On the audio side, it's basic, but the crowd chants help to give some atmosphere. It's much the same story on the pitch. It plays almost identically to Victory Goal, with an arcadey feel, though I will say it feels perhaps a touch smoother to control. Passing and player movement feel very fluid and responsive, making it easy to pick up and get straight into the action. It's not a massive leap forward versus the previous games, but that slight extra responsiveness does make it a bit more playable. Overall, this is perfectly serviceable, and the fact it's in English makes it the obvious pick over the original Victory Goal, and it's far from the worst on the console, but as you'll see shortly, later games in the series were a big improvement. Next up at number 9 we have JLeague Victory Goal 96, released exclusively in Japan in March 1996. This was another entry from Sega. As the name suggests, this is strictly for JLeague teams. The modes are largely the same as the original Victory Goal, but there is one standout addition, the Superstar mode. This lets you cherry pick players from different clubs to build your own custom all-star squad, which adds a nice bit of variety. Visually, this is a massive step up from the previous 3 Sega games in the series. The player models are finally fully 3D, moving away from the old blocky look. The stadiums look decent enough, though the crowds are still just a flat 2D mess. You also get full commentary, and while it is in Japanese, it definitely adds to the matchday atmosphere. On the pitch, it plays very similarly to the other games in the series, though strangely it feels slightly more sluggish than the International Victory Goal we just looked at. However, they have added a sprint button which helps. It actually reminds me a lot of an early Pro Evo in how it feels. One thing to note is that with most of these Sega games of the era, the camera defaults to behind the goal. Luckily you can change it. I'm glad this view never caught on. Plus there's a fully controllable replay mode, which is a great touch for the time. Overall it's a mixed bag. The visuals are a big improvement, but the slightly sluggish gameplay holds it back from climbing higher up the list. At number 8 we have Striker 96, developed by Rage Software. This hit the shelves in 1996 and offers a fresh take on the football games of this era. You get international teams to choose from, but sadly no licensed player names. However, it does feature an indoor mode, which is always a big win in my book. You can also choose between arcade and simulation playstyles. Surprisingly, it features detailed match stats at the end of the game, something to me that felt ahead of its time for a console game in 96. The presentation is a bit of a mixed bag. You get superb touches like national anthems and players actually warming up on the pitch. And while the visuals are basic, they have a certain charm to them. Just take a look at this. However, the commentary is shocking, limited to just a few repeated lines, and the crowd noise, it genuinely sounds like Darth Vader breathing down the microphone. Just like many games of this era, the camera defaults to behind the goal, though thankfully you can change it. Gameplay wise, I honestly didn't know what to expect here, but I was pleasantly surprised. It's quite simple, but once it clicks it's really fun to play. You can ping the ball around the pitch quickly and build up some nice moves. The only downside is the keepers. They are absolutely incredible, making scoring a real challenge. If you pick arcade mode, it basically takes the base game and cranks up the speed to 11. Overall, it's not the most polished or feature-rich game on the list, but it's charming, challenging, and most importantly, good fun. In at number 7 is the Japanese release of Sega International Victory Goal. Now don't confuse this with the Western version we saw back at number 10. This one hit the shelves in Japan a few months later in October 95, and those few months clearly made a difference. You get 12 international teams to choose from, and the usual suspects in terms of modes: Exhibition, World League, World Tournament and penalties. Presentation wise, it's had a bit of a facelift. The menus have been overhauled and you now get voiceovers announcing your team selection and menu options, which is a nice touch. The visuals stick to the established style of the series, but everything looks noticeably sharper and cleaner than before. However, they are still recycling those same goal celebrations on the Jumbotron. The real standout here is the music. The in-game tracks are absolute bangers. It follows the same gameplay blueprint as its predecessors, but it feels significantly faster and more fluid to play. It's not a reinvention of the wheel, but that extra speed makes a definite improvement over the Western version. Overall, it's essentially the polished, superior version of the game we saw at number 10. If you're going to play one of the early Victory Goal titles, this is the one to go for. At number 6 we have World Cup 98 France Road to Win. Released in Japan in June 98, just in time for the tournament, this was Sega's attempt to cash in on World Cup fever. If you have played Sega Worldwide Soccer 98, spoiler alert, it's coming up later, this game is going to feel extremely familiar because it recycles that exact engine. The big draw here is the World Cup license. It sets up the exact tournament groups for you. You can play through the qualifiers or just the main event itself. Since it's a World Cup game, it's strictly international teams. Interestingly, while the Japan team gets full real player names, everyone else is stuck with those off-brand Pro Evo style fake names, which takes the shine off the licensing a bit. Visually, it's a carbon copy of Sega Worldwide Soccer 98, so it looks decent enough. However, the sound is a major letdown. There's absolutely no commentary at all. It makes the matches feel a bit eerie and empty, especially for a game based on the biggest tournament in the world. Because it recycles the core engine from Worldwide Soccer 98, the gameplay is solid. It works well, but it doesn't bring anything new to the table. If you like the previous Sega games, you'll like this, but don't expect any surprises. Overall, it's a solid football game because it's built on great foundations, but the lack of commentary, limited modes, and the recycled assets make it feel like a bit of a quick cash grab rather than a full new release. Breaking into the top 5, we have FIFA Soccer 96, released in late 95 in North America and Europe. This was the moment EA brought their football machine to the 32-bit generation. In typical EA fashion, the licensing here is impressive. You have a massive selection of fully licensed clubs and international teams, alongside the usual leagues and cups. However, outside of the matches it feels a bit bare bones. There's no training mode and surprisingly little in the way of customization. Visually, this is a fascinating time capsule. It bills itself as 3D, but it's really more of a 2.5D hybrid. Think of it as the 16-bit FIFAs with a 3D makeover. You have 2D sprite players running around a 3D stadium. Speaking of which, the stadiums and crowds look pretty solid for this era. On the audio front, you get the legendary John Motson on commentary. He actually calls out the player names, which was a really nice touch for 1995. The crowd noise is solid too, but the chanting dies out completely, leaving you in silence and then randomly starts up again. I'll be honest, the gameplay takes some getting used to. The controls don't feel immediately natural, and for the first few games I was struggling to figure out what button did what. It's a challenging game too. The AI loves a last second tackle, making it genuinely hard to get a shot off. But once it clicks, it's rewarding. The more I played it, the more I actually started to enjoy the challenge. It's a bit rough around the edges by today's standards, but it's a solid, challenging football game, and the full licensing always gave these games an edge on the competition. At number 4, and apologies in advance for butchering the pronunciation, is the brilliantly named JLeague JQ Hono no Striker, developed by Konami's KCE Sapporo studio and released exclusively in Japan in '98. This brings some of that famous Konami football pedigree to the Saturn. As you might have guessed, the entire game was in Japanese, so navigating the menus takes a bit of guesswork. There are only J-League teams to choose from, with standard league and cup competitions to play through. Visually, it's not the prettiest game on the system. It is fully 3D, but the player models are a bit rough around the edges with some strange proportions. Everyone looks permanently hunched over with absolutely massive arms like they've overdone it at the gym. The pitch and stadiums look decent enough though. Audio-wise, it fares much better. You get full, natural-sounding Japanese commentary and some great crowd chanting that really helps build the atmosphere. Moving on to gameplay, this is where the game really shines. If you've played Goldstorm or an early ISS Pro, you'll feel right at home here. It's arcadey but incredibly fluid. The physics feel right, moving the ball around the pitch is satisfying, and you can score some genuinely nice goals. Don't let the Popeye-armed players put you off. Underneath the quirky visuals lies a fluid, enjoyable football game that's a clear sign of what Konami was starting to perfect with ISS Pro. Taking the number 3 slot is Sega Worldwide Soccer 97, also known as Victory Goal Worldwide Edition, depending on where you bought it. Released in late '96, this was Sega really starting to flex their muscles and show what the Saturn could do. Like with most of these games, it's strictly international business here, no club teams to be found. You get your standard cup, league and friendly modes alongside the standalone penalty shootout mode. Again, the big omission is the lack of real player names, so you're stuck with the fictional squads. However, they did include a player edit option, so if you have the patience, you can fix that for yourself. Visually, this is a looker. The stadiums look nice and really set the stage. The player models have a distinct arcade style to them, but they are detailed and look great for the era. The audio package matches the visuals too. You get nice clear commentary and crowd noise that actually sounds like a crowd. It's the gameplay where this really shines. It plays beautifully. The pace is spot on, not too fast, not too slow. And the passing is incredibly fluid and gives you a level of control that was rare for the time. In fact, it reminds me a lot of the early ISS Pro games on the PlayStation. Overall, it's smooth, it looks great and it plays like a dream, and was very nearly the best Sega football game on the console, but that would come later. Just missing out on our top spot at number 2 is FIFA Road to World Cup 98. Released in Europe in '97, this was the game where EA really started to find their stride in the 3D era. I sunk some serious hours into the PS1 version of this at the time, so let's see how the Saturn version fares. In terms of content, this is an absolute beast. You have a huge choice of teams and modes to get stuck into. You can transfer players between clubs, edit the squads to your heart's content, and yes, it features the legendary indoor mode. It oozes that trademark EA production value. The presentation is authentic, giving you that big match feel before you even kick a ball. You get the smooth stylings of Des Lynam and Andy Gray on commentary, calling out real player names, which was still a massive novelty at the time. The licensed stadiums actually look like the real-life counterparts, and the player models are decent. The crowds are a pixelated mess, but let's be honest, that was the norm at this time. The gameplay is a massive step up from FIFA 97, which was clunky and not much fun to play. This feels much more fluid. The game leans towards simulation, but it gives you a lot of freedom and control on the pitch. Once you get to grips with it, it's a lot of fun. Overall, it's polished, jam-packed with content, and it's got the indoor mode. It's a fantastic package that still holds up surprisingly well. And here is my number 1 football game on the Sega Saturn. Sega Worldwide Soccer 98. Released in Europe in October 97, this was the direct sequel to our number 3 pick, and it took everything that game did well and dialed it up a notch. Content-wise, it's impressive. You get 48 international teams and 60 club teams to choose from. A nice bonus for us in the UK is that the English club teams actually have real player names. However, there is one absolutely baffling design choice here. The club teams you can choose are locked to the language you select in the menus. So if I play in English, I can only pick English clubs. And if I want to play a Spanish club, I have to reboot and select Spanish language. It's a very strange quirk. On the mic we have Gary Bloom, joined by...
With me in the commentary position today is Jack Charlton. Hello, Jack.
Good afternoon. I'm really looking forward to today's game. There's certainly an intense rivalry between these two teams, and we should be in for a cracking match.
Yes, I couldn't believe it myself. That's really the legendary Jack Charlton. Visually, it hasn't changed much from the 97 edition. The stadiums are fully 3D and look decent, but the crowds are still just flat sprites. It was never the prettiest series on the market, but it does the job. But the reason this is at number 1 is simple, the gameplay. It plays almost exactly the same as the 97 version, which is a very good thing. It strikes that perfect balance between arcade fun and simulation depth. The physics feel right, the game is fluid, and it reminds me so much of the best Pro Evo titles and how it handles. It gives you total control over what you want to do with the ball. It might have a few weird quirks in the menus, and it might not be a graphical powerhouse, but where it matters most, on the pitch, it's best in show. And with the added suite of teams and some licensing this time, this is the undisputed king of Saturn football games. It's fluid, it's fun, and for me it's hands down the best football experience you can get on the console. So there we have it, the top 10 football games on the Sega Saturn. It definitely fared a little better than the Dreamcast did in terms of quantity, but I think the quality is definitely there too if you know where to look. But what do you think? Is Worldwide Soccer 98 your favourite, or does FIFA 98 deserve the top spot? Let me know your favourites in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please click the like button and consider subscribing if you want to see more. And if you didn't like it, that's fine, just let me know why in the comments.